first and foremost, thank you so much for being here today. I know it's going to mean a lot to the folks that get to see this interview, but it also means a great deal to me. So thank you, first of all, for being here.
Absolutely. It's our
You.
pleasure.
Yes.
Um, you know, one thing that is so fitting, and we'll get into this a little bit later, but this month is Women's History Month, as you know. And so it's been so awesome, and I feel like really impactful that all the conversations or interviews that we've had thus far have been with um, female professionals in the industry. And it's so incredible to be able to hear their stories. And so I'm looking forward to, hearing yours. So without further ado, um, you know, in doing the research and background on you, I found out, you recently were featured in Essence for being one of this year's Women in Film Pathmakers. And so, this recognition is not like a light recognition. It recognizes and highlights the career journeys of incredibly talented and passionate Black women leaders and innovators in Hollywood. What's more, you were nominated by Yvette Lee Bowser, which is awesome. So I'd like to kind of start the conversation here and kind of talk about your book that recently came out called Living Double. It talks about your experiences as twins and also your paths in life as far as like, what you're doing and also with the entertainment industry. So can you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about like your book and kind of where the title came from?
Oh, absolutely. So we just recently published our first book, and it's interesting because if you would have talked to us about a year ago about writing a book about your success in Hollywood, I'd be like, what? Not there yet, not quite. But when a girlfriend kind of presented the opportunity to us, and really kind of laid out what our experience has been, looking back and reflecting on it, it is something that is quite unexpected. We were two young girls who were obsessed with television as military brats in Germany, came back to America and grew up in Florida in the South and had absolutely no connections to Hollywood, and somehow managed to become staff on one of the biggest hits, in Fox history, in television history. And it's one of those things where it's like when I really take a step back and think about our journey, we wanted people who are like us, who don't necessarily have connections to this industry or friends or peers, but have a dream and a vision about one day being a part of it and working in it in some form or fashion, whether it's on screen or behind the scenes, to feel like even though they don't have connections or have, specific steps that they know that they have to take to get involved, that they feel that they can to have access to it. And so when it was presented to us that like we could help other people who are basically similar to us have access to working in this industry, that's when it became very clear to us that yes, we get to write this book. It's not about us and our success. It really is about creating access for other people. And Living Double, the title actually comes from, it's an homage to Miss Yvette Lee Bowser and the TV show that she created, Living Single. And just to give you a little bit of information about Living Single, like I said, JaSheika and I were children obsessed with television. Living Single was a show that we grew up watching. And I remember, I think we were in high school, my freshman year of high school, reading an article in Essence magazine. That's the funny part. It's the full circle part of the story. Yeah. About Yvette Lee Bowser, the sister who created Living Single. And it was this article that featured Yvette and how she was the first Black woman to create and run her own television series. And as two kids who were television obsessed for years, it had never occurred to us that like, oh, you could look like us as Black women and be responsible for the whole show, for the words that are coming out of these people's mouths. We could actually, that is an avenue that we could take to be involved in something that we love and are obsessed with so much. So that was a seed that was planted in our heads, freshman year of high school. And even though we love TV, I think, I was always good at writing stories and creating. We were obsessed with soap operas as kids. In the forefront of our minds, like we had to follow a professional path. I think a lot of kids And I'll just say, particularly, students of color feel this obligation to find success in the American dream through, being a professional, so that you don't have to worry about where your next paycheck is coming, doctor, lawyer, something that, like, kind of reflects some sort of
guaranteed paycheck, basically.
not the creative arts where your check is questionable. That's what I'll say. And so because of that, the idea of working in TV was something that was in the back of our minds, but it wasn't until my sister, I started off going to the University of Florida. My sister followed me to the University of Florida 2 years in. When she came, I remember I was a nutrition major studying to work I wanted to be orthodontist. I knew in high school, I was like, I'm in people's mouths, I'm working in dental labs, I'm going to be orthodontist, go to dental school. And my sister came into UF and was like, I just majored in telecommunications and TV production. And I was like, well, I love TV too. Like, what? You know what I mean? And so, like, for the first time ever, I'm the older twin. I'm older than her. I'm an hour older than her. And so for the first time ever, I decided to follow my sister, and I decided to change my major, which was something that it concerned my father, who definitely had his eye on me going to dental school, but ultimately it paid off. So to get back to the question, Living Double is an homage to Yvette and her show being the inspiration for us following this career path, but it's also, it's what our experience is as twins. We've been living double our entire life. From the womb to the world, that's what we tell people. So we were just very happy to kind of just share a little bit of our experience. It's very unique. But at the same time, there are moments that are very universal, I think, for most creative artists, and just kind of give a little bit of insight of what it's like, the ups and downs of this career path. But what we deem is the purpose behind, or the reason behind our success, I think, is being able to be clear on the vision of what you want to do, not having it all figured out on how to, like, get there, but declaring to the universe, declaring to, God, your faith, whatever it may be, this is what I want to do. There's going to be, a way for you to kind of get there. So I don't know if I answered the question or if I just went a roundabout way, but Sheikah, please contribute.
I think you spoke a whole gamut of, response into this question.
Okay.
I appreciate the response, and obviously very thorough. But just hearing you talk, and you were nominated for the Women in Film Pathmakers by Yvette Lee, right? Or excuse me, by Yvette Lee Bowser. And so, that's someone that you were inspired by as you were younger, and now you basically, you have a book out, you've done all this awesome and tremendous work in TV. And do you feel like you are having the same kind of impact and effect on little boys and girls out there who see your success and they're looking and they're thinking, like, maybe that could be me?
That's such a beautiful question. I feel like what I always say is that if we can have a fraction of impact the way that Yvette has impacted others in this business, and it's not just us as Black women. She's impacted a ton of writers, producers, and creatives behind the scenes that people aren't even aware of,
Including Temple. Hello.
Yep.
That's true.
If we could have a fraction of impact on others, we will have, I consider, have high exceeded our purpose, because I do feel like what Nika, basically just reiterating what JaNeika was just saying, that for us is so much more about, in the book, it's more about encouraging people to remember to dream, and to dream without any type of hesitation or any limitations. I think so often society or the world will kind of, show you, or at least try to tell you how far you can go. And we don't believe in that at all. We're two girls from Florida, military brats, didn't stick in the same school at all. Were influenced, thank goodness, to our grandparents who sent us VHS tapes of American TV shows when we were living in Germany for a little while. And that is what sparked our interest and obsession with television. And that is what allowed us
to dream.
To dream.
You know, that,
and live in other worlds. Mm-hmm.
It's interesting that you mentioned military brats. So I'm in the military, almost 20 years now. And what's so interesting is, you know, the connection that you made with watching American television overseas. And I think that's something special that, you know, just connects you to home. And then to be able to see Living Single, and you're like, hey, I can totally relate to that. That's awesome.
Exactly. And it's so funny that you bring up military, because that's been also a huge part of our experience too. I think that what people don't necessarily understand about the military is how diverse it is, and how I think that also was just part of, I'm saying this is part of our experience. There's a culture shock in being a military brat at a very young age, and then coming to America and realizing the divisions in cultures and races. And as growing up in the military, it's something that you don't really recognize, because, you know, in the military, everybody's, you know, military. So you don't think about everybody's American. You're not thinking about like division. You know what I'm saying? And so for us, and I say that to say that it's interesting, because I think because we did come up in the military at a very young age, it's been so easy for us to be so adaptable to various environments and various groups of people, which has afforded us a lot of blessings in this business, to be able to maneuver and go into any circle and be amiable, you know, and work well. So yeah.
You know, I've thought about that myself, just the fact of like traveling overseas, being exposed to different things in life, and also the camaraderie that you feel with different people of different races and backgrounds, and all that,
Yes.
like you mentioned, plays into certain aspects of what you've done.
Yes.
You know, as executive, you know, story editors for series like Empire, your writing has a large reach into the Black audience. And it likely affects the way that Black people in the community view themselves and their relations in society. So can you kind of walk us through how, either on Empire or, you know, generally now, you create characters and stories that break away from kind of the traditional portrayal of Blacks in film?
Yeah, you want to start, Nika, or?
Well, I was going to start by saying, I'm going to do a preamble, and then you can jump in with the actual answer. No, it's just interesting that you say that, because I remember years ago, before I was staffed, there have been so many, and I'm being very frank and vulnerable with you guys, and saying our names are JaNeika and JaSheika James. When you see a script with JaNeika and JaSheika James, you can automatically think what the assumption is from the reader on what type of writers we are. We're obviously Black women. And I remember, you know, years early on in our career, whether or not we should put, you know, there were questions on whether or not we should put our full names on a script, because there was this part of us, a very naive part of us at a very early stage in our career, in thinking that we don't want to be known as Black writers. We want to be known as writers first. We can tell any story. We don't just have to write Black stories. We can, and we will, but we can do so much more. This idea that we needed to prove that we were beyond just our race and our culture in terms of who we are as storytellers. And it wasn't until, and we talk about this a little bit in the book, until we had an encounter with, I think we were at Kim Coles' birthday party, and we had an encounter with Erica Alexander. Living Single literally plays a role in our career trajectory, like, all the time. And Erica Alexander was asking us about, like, what do we do? And we were telling her that we were writers and, you know, aspiring writers. And she said, you know, well, hurry up, ladies, hurry up. We're waiting on you. We're waiting on you. And it wasn't, and I remember getting so emotional that night. Me and Sheikah were in our apartment, almost in tears, because it wasn't until she, as this Black actress who had inspired us and everything that we wanted to do, basically said, hey, we're waiting on you, sisters, to tell our stories. And it hit me that we've been doing all this trying to prove that we can write anything, when the reality is that these actresses and these other creatives and these other artists are depending on us to bring ourselves to the table fully and completely, to be able to tell the richness of our stories properly. So, okay, that was my preamble into the actual answer.
So the question was about what was it like basically presenting characters that were so different from the way that Black
we've seen before.
characters
Yeah.
that we've seen before. I think, and I have to give credit to Lee Daniels and Danny Strong with regard to Empire, because Lee was and is always adamant about telling the truth. And when he says that telling the truth, it's like, well, some people may say, well, that's not my truth, but it was his truth and his experience, and with so many of those characters in that show. And I think one of the things that I find compelling in television, in any television that I watch, is yeah, back in the 80s, we had the Cosby Show, we have all the, Family Matters, we have a lot of, because we were so rare on TV, seeing ourselves was such a rarity that we wanted to make sure the best image possible was presented. Whereas I think
in a way that we weren't allowed to be human or have flaws. It's like
exactly.
the best type of African American needs to be presented to the world, because of how many issues are going on in the world with regards to race. Okay, go ahead.
When you watch other TV shows, other people, and I'll just say, other characters, commercial.
Our white counterparts can be human.
Yeah, they can have all sorts of flaws, be human, what I'm saying, and interesting and compelling. And it's like, well, why can't we be that? And I think that was the approach when it came to telling these stories of Lucius Lyon and Cookie Lyon. They weren't by any means not the perfect, Huxtables, but at the same time, they were still human and they were flawed. And we watched them as they went through their relationship struggles, dealt with, having their family. Do we or do we not get back together? Like all of those elements that make a great soap opera, you know what I mean? So I feel like in my personal opinion, I feel like that's why the show was such a mega hit, and so many people were watching and so many people were intrigued each week to see what was going to happen, because at the end of the day, everybody is like, all of us are, imperfect to a certain degree. And so we're like, okay, I can relate to these people. You know what I mean?
Imperfect, growing and evolving. And it was the perfect foundation and ground for us to kind of, like you said, come in as staff writers, growing all the way up to supervising producers, to kind of learn to challenge ourselves, to kind of question and, skip over the rules, when it comes to TV. I think that's where Empire found its success. They did not follow any rules, how to be a certain type of Black in terms of presentation through story. They were just real, they were flawed. And I think that's what kind of allows us now to be very comfortable in telling very real, reflective stories and representing African Americans that aren't typical or stereotypical. It's like, no, and especially now, because there's a wide variety of television that you can watch and see different types of Black folks represented. We don't have to bag on any one particular representation. It's like, no, we're not a monolith. You're going to see a whole lot of different representations, and pick and choose which one you want to watch.
It's interesting because you mentioned comfortable and challenges almost in the same breath, right? And so, do you find that with television shows that are predominantly Black cast members, do you find that they're interpreted or treated differently by viewers or critics or the networks, as compared to
all of the above? All of the above, 100%. As women who have worked on a show that literally kept the lights on at Fox for a couple years, in terms of it being number one in the household for a number of years, with a predominantly Black cast, and seeing what it looks like to work on shows that have the cachet that aren't necessarily predominantly led by predominantly Black cast. There's a complete difference in the way that network execs and the head of a network responds to it, in terms of the budget limitations, in terms of the marketing, in terms of the appreciation. I think that, and I can speak very frankly about this, for what all that Empire represented in 2015 when it premiered. It was like a phenom, you know what I'm saying? Just the way that it went up every single week, and then it literally led the network for years. So literally helped them build business and bring in and usher in so much other programming. The way that our show ended, obviously COVID was a problem, but it just was very lackluster, and not as, I don't feel like the show ended with the respect that it deserved, given what it has represented in history.
It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't satisfying at all.
It wasn't satisfying, and it honestly, I personally feel it was sad and kind of disrespectful given what it represented to the culture and just to television history at the time. You know what I mean? And I think that, yeah, if it was not a predominantly Black-led cast, it wouldn't have had the same treatment. I look at shows like Supernatural, which again was on longer than our show, but Supernatural was also supposed to end last season the same way that our show was supposed to end, and the pandemic kind of sorted that away. So then they just extended. Okay, we're gonna give them the proper ending, which they deserve, which I think is important.
Yeah, we're gonna give the fans what they deserve and what they've been, the ones who've been hanging in, watching it for this long, what they've been waiting for. So yeah.
So I mean, yeah, there's a complete difference, and it's hard to go on record and say that, but yeah, I mean, no matter how successful you are right now, I'm going to say right now, because the tongue is powerful. We say that in the book too, and I don't want to put it out there as if things will never change. But currently, no matter how successful your show or your product is, there's a different standard just in terms of like how elevated it is, when it's predominantly like African American or people of color versus our white counterparts.
Sorry, I keep trying to cut you off. You know what I would equate it to? It's the idea, like when you have a good show or just a premise and you're just like, oh yes, I'm here for it, right? You just know it's going to be a commercial success. Whereas you find that the whether it's leading African-American cast or led, created by an African-American, person of color, whatever, it's almost like they wait to see what happens, as opposed to saying, you know what, this is my product, I'm producing and distributing this, so let me just make sure out the gate it's going to be the bomb, as opposed to just waiting to see how people respond and then getting on board when it becomes a huge success. The best example I can give to that is when I was working at the studio back in the day at ABC Studios, working in what we call the golden age of the network, when Desperate Housewives, Lost, and Grey's Anatomy all premiered. And as somebody who worked at the studio, I know for a fact these people had no clue and did not think Grey's Anatomy would last. So the fact that that is the show that is still running to this day, 18 plus years later, is a testament.
Led by Shonda Rhimes.
Created by Shonda Rhimes. It's just an example of, the doubt that you kind of have, but then when it becomes a hit, oh my gosh, let's get on board. And we were behind it the whole time.
We touch on some challenges, but more specifically and directly, in episode 2 of Lovecraft Country, Whitey's on the Moon, we talk about, or it shows like Ruby, living her life as a Black woman, but she also has the opportunity to live her life as a white woman, and she sees the clear differences in white privilege, that what it has to offer in her life. And according to recent studies conducted at UCLA, the majority of talent in roles like directors and writers are actually, they're predominantly white and they're predominantly male. And so again, we're talking about challenges here. So I'm wondering, like, what barriers have you faced being a woman and also being a Black woman at that?
I was literally just having a conversation with my girlfriend about this last night. I think as our experience as Black women in this business is that we are often underestimated. And it can be a good thing. It can be an annoying thing. It's
exhausting.
It's exhausting
at times.
and I tend to get very angry about it, but then I often try to flip my mentality and think, you know what? All right, they're just going to be blown away. I'm going to blow them out of their minds when they see what we're capable of producing. And it's fine to a certain degree, but I think people should always, I think they should, I think the business should shift its perspective on what people are capable of doing and have the expectation that we are going to provide as equally as anybody else, as any of our male counterparts, particularly white male counterparts. We are just as good and capable. If you hold us to those, standards, then have that expectation that we are going to
deliver the same,
and exceed,
and exceedingly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in episode 8, Jigabobo, there's a scene where Montrose is basically having a conversation with Dee, and he's talking about, don't let them take it from you, and if they do, they're gonna have to fight to get what they want from you. And he's speaking obviously about race here. And so I'm just curious, like, in this industry, you hear often stories of people like, trying to take credit for stuff they didn't do. And I'm just curious, is that something that might have happened to you or you've experienced?
It's very important. You know what? We were just on a panel last night, and what I will say is how important it is to make sure that you essentially be very clear of what your boundaries are when it comes to acknowledgement for your work.
Another example I'll give, and I'm not saying that it's in any way the same, because I'm not taking anything away from either of these creatives, but what you'll notice is Chewing Gum, Michaela Cole, and Fleabag, Phoebe Cates, right? Like, was that her name? Is that her name? Is it Phoebe? Is it Phoebe?
It's not Phoebe Cate, because Phoebe Cate is from Gremlins.
Name. Anyways, the creator of that. So, one show, was like really cool, didn't get the same notoriety, but then, the other one came out, whether it's a Netflix or Amazon thing, but like became this big phenomenon. It's like, wait, no, she was doing the same thing. It's just as good. You know what I mean? Like, so yeah, that's an example of, I think to your question about like, not taking credit, but, like just the different dynamics of how people choose to promote and, support one creator versus another one. And their work is kind of in the same vein and the same reference of greatness, so to speak.
It's so interesting because, I've decided to like write a couple of things, and I have all these great ideas, and there's people who are like, hey, you got to protect your work. So it's interesting to hear your perspective on that. And that kind of leads me to this next question. Like, what advice do you have for college students going into the career field of storytelling about using their platform to be a catalyst for change?
I'm all for it. I say do it now. I wish that we had the opportunities back in the day to be able to just go directly to the people, go directly to the audience and create and be able to showcase what we can do. I just feel like right now it's almost, I think of it like the way that Drake basically took his music directly to the people and was independent for so long before signing with somebody. It's like we have the opportunity as creatives to not wait on any studio, any platform to tell us or give us the green light. No, we are the green light ourselves, essentially. And I'm all about, kind of literally showing these old heads, is what I call them, basically, because they have formulas that they're used to in terms of creating and getting things out. No, it's like showing them, screw the formula. I'm going to do this, and people are going to watch it, and people are going to grab onto it. And too bad you missed out on the opportunity to be able to make money off of what I'm creating, but we're good over here. So yes, I say like whatever, like one of the best pieces of advice I got was from a man named Jamie Wooten when I first started working with Temple on Half and Half back in the day. And Jamie told me, writers write. Like, there are a lot of people who are out here saying that they're writers and like, I want to write, I want to create, I want to run TV shows, but like, okay, where's the script? What's on the page? Just do it. That's my advice.
So, as we're talking, this question came to mind, because you mentioned direct interaction, the public or with the fans. How is how do you use social media? Do you use it to kind of reach out and say, hey, here's the next best thing that we got going, or just keep in touch with your fans?
Absolutely. We use it. Okay. Instagram is our thing. And I think that first of all, we promote all the things that are going on with us on our Instagram, our book, any type of advertising or media like about us, we promote it via Instagram. But also we use our platforms to promote what we love and and bring energy to what we're trying to create. A lot of the projects that we're creating right now have to deal with minority women, Black women, and for particularly like love stories. And so whenever I get the chance, I'm trying, if I know that I'm trying to cultivate a certain vibe with the project that we're working on, it's important to use Instagram to kind of really put out there some, things that are in alignment with our vibe as women. And for me, it's like, promoting love and ambitious women. And for Sheika, hers is about promoting like icons and, history and things like that. So like, because all of it feels very much of what we are currently working on and creating, it all just kind of helps, we're just like we're creating the space for, what we want to manifest next.
I was going to say, it's almost like our online vision boarding, basically, or dream boarding, like that
actually is exactly what it is. Yeah. We're like sharing our vision board with everybody so that like all the positive energy can just go into manifesting what's next.
That's so cool. Cause like with that, you get other people's input, and that helps build that vision out even further. Thank you so much for your time today.